In the second hour, we have Barry Prince, who has joined us once again, and I am joined by author and just overall interesting character, Daniel Louis Crumpton, from downloadedcontent.com and, formerly of ZenInTheCore.com, but of downloadedcontent.com. I'm the author of Then Came the Flood. Of course, Barry Prince is the host of The Big Puzzle. You could probably find some of his archives out there right now, and in a couple of weeks, you'll be hearing the live show back on Shake and Wake Radio. Also, your calls at 218-339-8525. That's 218-339-8525. Your calls, and we may have some special other guests about to arrive. Now, I did say Chutes and Ladders in the promo for tonight, and why? Because I wanted to discuss the American polititerati, if you will, the mess that's going on regarding, hey, we the people getting active and making statements out there. Interesting thing came up recently. Guess what? Acquitted. Not guilty, in fact. The occupiers of that refuge up in Oregon. Remember that story? I'm sure you do. Well, the fact is that Ammon Bundy, Ryan, and others, 5 other co-defendants, if I understand correctly, were all found not guilty. Of course, others had rolled and cut deals and all that beforehand, and we're going to get into that story with my 2 panelists and some other guests as we go forward. So anyway, Daniel, you're on the line, right?
Yeah, this is the part where we do the fake hello and greeting and everything, like we didn't do it during the break. Like during the break, we actually connected.
Show either.
Yeah,
we didn't say hi to the FBI and CIA guys. We forgot that tonight, Chuck.
Oh, you are correct. Barry, would you like to do the honors there before Daniel gets...
We do appreciate all you guys that are out there listening to our shows, and if you're involved with government intelligence agencies, I hope you learned something tonight, because you think you're part of the program. You're just a little pawn. You're one pawn above us. So pay attention, and welcome to the show.
Absolutely. So, Daniel, like you were saying, this is part of the fake greeting thing where we do it on air, even though we've already talked off air. And, in fact, well, if I wanted to get up, I could go shake your hand right now. But anyway,
you're literally like 8 feet away from me. But yeah, during the break, we do the real hello where we can say what we really want to say. And now we do the fake, how are you doing, Chuck? Hey, Barry, how's it going? Gotta keep the illusion going because we're on the radio and everything. We're on the air. So it's like, we just walked on the set together, guys. How's it going? Jesus. Guys, the three of us are wearing boxers or we're in our underwear right now, so I'm sorry to break the illusion, but we're just people like you. So anyway.
Hey, I did brush my teeth before the show started, okay, Daniel? So
Ruby.
Listen, I'm sure you did, Barry, because your microphone's still working. But meanwhile, I'm sitting here, actually Daniel doesn't know this, but I'm naked. So anyway, moving forward.
And you're 8 feet away?
There are walls between us, trust me.
There are walls interceding in that 8 feet, so he cannot see me at the moment, nor can anyone else, thankfully for all of you. Yeah, thank you, Jesus. There you go.
Well, I was going to say that'd be pretty weird. One of you guys sitting on one side of the living room, the other, they're 8 feet apart and talking to each other like you're another. Oh, I'm over in Oklahoma and I'm up in Kansas,
Yeah.
Anyways, the illusion's not there, guys. Anyways, go ahead.
What are you going to do? Daniel just decided to take a sledgehammer to the entirety of the fourth wall right there. So why not? Yes.
F that wall. F it. F that wall. And the reason I'm saying F is because I got chastised earlier today, and I'm going to call him out for what he is. Mr. Ochelli told me that I should watch my language when being a guest or a panelist upon his show.
Yeah, I screwed up a couple times tonight.
Tonight is going to be F-bomb free, I think.
Okay. And I apologize because I slipped up a couple times in the first hour there.
Well, look, I
so peed off about certain subjects it just slips out, okay?
No, I got it. And you could say pissed off. I mean, look, I try to maintain a basic broadcast. And this is my desire. It's not the network or anything. I would prefer it if we're not just cursing every few seconds, and it does keep us from being played on certain other networks and da-da-da-da-da. And I don't want to have to drop the explicit label in iTunes and whatever. I don't want to go through all that. So the fact is that, I just try and keep it to a minimum. I know I'm a bad guy, right?
Okay, hang on.
You're no fun anymore.
There, I just slapped myself a couple times. It won't happen again, guys.
Wow, that was a good sound, too. But anyway, back to the serious discussion, right? I'm going to read to you guys from just a brief piece from OregonLive.com, okay? Just to give people a flavor in case they've been under a rock and haven't noticed what happened, because, of course, Fox News, CNN, all those other wonderful three-letter networks have already reported on this. But hey, let's bring people up to speed. A federal jury on Thursday found Ammon Bundy, his brother Ryan Bundy, and 5 co-defendants not guilty of conspiring to prevent federal employees from doing their jobs through intimidation, threat, or force during the 41-day occupation of the Malheur National Wildlife Refuge. The Bundy brothers and occupiers, Jeff Banta and David Fry, oh boy, that guy, also were found not guilty of having guns in a federal facility. Kenneth Mendenbach was found not guilty of stealing government property, and a hung jury was declared on Ryan Bundy's charge of theft of an FBI surveillance cameras. Okay, more than we could have hoped for, said one of Ammon Bundy's lawyers, J. Morgan Philpott. Stunning, said defense lawyer Lisa Ludwig, who was standby counsel for Ryan Bundy. I'm just thrilled, said Neil Wampler's attorney, Lisa Maxfield. The jury of 9 women and 3 men returned the verdicts after 5 hours of deliberations on Thursday in the high-profile case that riveted the state and drew national and international attention to the federal bird sanctuary in rural eastern Oregon. Each defendant stood separately facing the jury. As the judge read the verdicts, Ammon Bundy, his hands clasped behind his back, nodded as the not guilty verdicts were read for him first. As he sat, he smiled and rubbed the shoulder of his lawyer, Marcus Mumford. But there's a lot more to this story, isn't there, Daniel, than that brief little bit of the thing from Oregon Live, isn't there?
Yeah, a little bit more I think is real interesting, too. And before we kind of get the ball rolling on this, I know that me and you haven't even really talked about this verdict in person. I think we both kind of instinctively were holding our thoughts on this Oregon decision to do this on air, which is cool. Right. But I know right at the outset, so I'm just going to speak freely because I don't even know if I've had time to process it completely. But because me and you have been so vocal on this issue, and because of what may be said now, some logical misleaps may be made that we're going to contradict ourselves, at least me anyway. I'm speaking for myself. But so I want to go ahead and put that out there because, like I said, I'm still processing it. But where it gets really interesting is that after the verdict was read, Ammon Bundy's attorney was tased and arrested. And so there's an article from WWeek.com. And let me see, I haven't even really had time to scan it, but if I may.
Well, no, absolutely. I want you to read that. See, that's why I pointed out that's interesting that the stand-in attorney was making the comment about Bundy's verdict because guess what? The one guy was taken into custody. So that's why. Yeah, go ahead.
So from WWeek.com, the headline is Ammon Bundy's attorney won the biggest case of his life, then he was tased in the courtroom. And it goes on to say, in a bizarre cap to Thursday's stunning acquittal of Ammon Bundy and his crew of, quote, patriots, U.S. Marshals wrestled Bundy's attorney to the ground and tased him multiple times after he refused to stop arguing for Bundy's immediate release. After the jury delivered the verdict, U.S. District Judge Anna J. Brown made plans to release David Fry, the only Oregon defendant who was still in jail, but not charged in a related Nevada case. Fry was released late Thursday night to a crowd of supporters who greeted him with hugs, praise, and pizza. Okay. Brown said Bundy and his brother Ryan would remain in the custody of the U.S. Marshals pending their transfer to Nevada. Marshals there had placed a custody hold on the Bundy brothers pending their scheduled February trial over charges related to the 2014 standoff at the Bunkerville Ranch owned by their father, Cliven Bundy. Bundy's attorney, Marcus Mumford, didn't find that persuasive. Judge Brown had earlier refused to consolidate Bundy's detention order in the Nevada case with his detention in Oregon, finding that she had no authority over orders made by the federal court in Las Vegas. Marcus Philpott, co-counsel for Bundy, said later that it was Mumford and Bundy's position that the judge had either absolute authority over Bundy's detention status or she had none. Quote, if you don't have authority to consolidate, how do you have the authority to detain him, end quote, Philpott asked. Our argument is that is legal, and that's the discussion that Marcus wanted to have. It's a legal distinction that he should have been allowed to have with the judge without any exception that the marshals would assault him and tase him for doing it, end quote. Mumford began to argue that case to Brown following the verdict, quote, if they want him, they know where to find him, end quote. Mumford told the judge, quote, I don't see any paper proving their authority to hold him, end quote. Mumford continued to argue for Bundy's immediate release, leaping to his feet and raising his voice. Judge Brown, who often seemed exasperated by Mumford during the roughly 6-week trial, wasn't having it. Quote, you really need to not yell at me now or ever again, end quote. Okay, let me interject. That sounds like a fucking middle schooler. Excuse me for saying fucking. But
here we go. Yeah.
Brown said, but right? Yeah, a judge, a federal judge or whatever is saying, you really don't need to yell at me, like now or like ever. Really? For real?
Well,
okay.
You know what else, too, is that this gets into the idea that regardless of the legality of things, a judge's order is a judge's order. So you're really at the mercy of these people in black robes, no matter what you do. No matter what your legal standing really is, unless you've got a lot of money and you've got, a fancy team of lawyers to handle everything. That's another story. But otherwise, you're at the mercy of whoever's in the black robe and their whims.
Yeah, so it continues. That's when the marshals started to close in from all directions. Yeah, after the judge spoke, right? Mumford seemed surprised by their response, looking around and asking, quote, what are you all doing, end quote. The biggest, tallest marshal stood inches from Mumford's face. Quote, you need to stand down, end quote, he said. Take a step back, gentlemen, Brown said. But Mumford continued to press his point. No, Your Honor, he yelled. He is acquitted. About half a dozen marshals piled atop him. Everyone out, Judge Brown ordered. Philpott said after the verdict announcement that the scene was a perfect example of the sort of government tyranny Ammon Bundy was trying to fight when he led the January armed seizure of the Malheur National Wildlife Refuge that caused an estimated $6 million in damage and left dozens in jail and one man killed by Oregon State Police. Quote, there was sufficient provocation, end quote, Philpott said. Quote, they assaulted an attorney that had made no aggressive move whatsoever, threw him to the ground and tased him, which is very symbolic of the federal government's over-violent and aggressive actions that led up to this very trial, end quote. Mumford was released 2 hours later, standing on the front steps of the Mark O. Hatfield Courthouse. He told press that he was charged with disorderly conduct and resisting a lawful order. Surrounded by cameras, Mumford described his version of events. Quote, they surrounded me and Mr. Bundy, and I said, if you have authority to arrest him, please show me your authority. And instead, they took me down on the ground, and they rammed my head into the ground, and they tased me. And that's the end of the article.
Well, isn't that a thing of beauty, right? Now, this is an interesting scenario aside from even if the lawyer wasn't tased, we'd have a lot to talk about here, I think, because fact is, I got to be honest with you, I was a bit stunned that there was a not guilty verdict here. I really thought, until, I had time to reflect on it afterwards, that, that 20-year threat that they had over everybody's head. And by the way, there's still people that have not gone to trial yet, including Jason Patrick, whose trial is scheduled for when, Daniel? February. I mean, which at this point in time, given the fact that the real leadership, allegedly, of the ring of individuals who participated in this action have already been handled by the courts, you got to figure that it looks good for Jason Patrick to be, guess what, just sent home without even having to go through the process of a trial, in my estimation, but who knows? Again, you're at the whim of the guy in the black robe or woman or whatever, but the reality here is that it does not bode quite as well. A lot of people are celebrating over this, but I think it it places a lot of individuals in a more precarious situation that are activists in this realm. What do you think of that, Daniel?
Well, first let me say, me and you have never really made an opinion on whether or not these guys should be found guilty or not. I know I haven't anywhere. I think we've been most vocal about Pete Santilli, and which has ruffled, some feathers, and I'm sorry for that, but it's just the truth. But I'm like I said when this all went down, I disagreed with a lot of what these guys did. I thought it was not the best course of action, okay, at all. It wasn't the best course of action. It did not end pretty, at all. However, it's my opinion that the people who were involved, when they did it out of a genuine and sincere passion to do something about a tyrannical government. Now,
Absolutely,
I give them that. Not all of them. I believe that there were a few bad ones in the bunch that had alternative agendas. But for the most part, from what I know, these guys had a really good – they were coming from a really good place in their heart. But they made some mistakes that I highly disagree with and I thought was stupid and hurt the liberty movement. Okay, so now that we find out that it's not guilty, I'm very ecstatic about it. I'm glad that even though they did screw up, that there was a jury of peers who are Americans who saw their point and came back and said, you know what, yeah, maybe I wish we were in the deliberation room. That'd be great. We weren't, so we don't know yet. But it's cool that a bunch of Americans said, you know what, these guys they kept mentioning the Constitution, and maybe they were wrong in their interpretation, maybe they were right in their interpretation, who knows, but they did what they thought was right, and so not guilty, right? And, 12 human beings, 12 American citizens, they just went up against the federal government and said something today, okay? They said something incredible today. And we really should take pause at this. Those of us who really care about our rights and this country and this, this world, really, we should go, you know what, something good happened, when this verdict came out, that we may stumble, we may fall, for personal freedom and freedom as a whole. But at the end of the day, the power truly does still rest with the people. And how do we know that? Because if you go by the book, these guys should be in prison by the book. But 12 human beings overrode the book, so we need to really think about that for a minute. Well,
I think that it speaks to the fact that there is a valuable weapon still in our hands when you have a jury trial. You are at the mercy of 12 individuals, right? And they dismissed 2 people, I think it was, for conflicts of interest and had 2 alternates step in and all that. I think that this was part of the process. But the fact is that jury nullification is an effective weapon against overreaching government or overreaching regulation or overreaching law enforcement. If you demand a jury trial, this is something to keep in mind, universally, really, in the American mindset, is that you have the chance to maybe plead your case in front of people and get them to understand that perhaps the law is the problem and you weren't necessarily the criminal. So I look at it as a victory in that sense. I certainly do. And you can't deny it otherwise. Now, meanwhile, I never made any pronouncement about what I thought should happen to them legally, right? I made the same kind of statements that you did regarding this, that I thought it was ill-advised, the path that they chose to make their point, and that their point was not being made clearly. And the only argument I had with them really was their use of the media and lack thereof use of the media regarding, obviously the Pete Santilli thing, the fact that they didn't really make themselves fully comprehensible to the public to get them to understand what the point of what was going on was. But I guess for 12 people in that deliberation room, something had to have made sense that made it so that these guys weren't guaranteed that, that 20 years that was supposed to be hanging over their heads. And meanwhile, there were guys who cut deals, right, who took 3-year sentences.
Yeah. And I bet they feel pretty crunchy right about now. for turning. They turned state's evidence, so they're going to serve like 3 years or something. Meanwhile, the rest of the guys, they're not found not guilty. So the guys who turned state's evidence, everybody who's listening that happens to be in the Patriot or Liberty movement, go and Google who turned state's evidence. There's your rats.
Exactly.
Okay? There's
the rats are where they belong.
The rats are going to be where they belong.
Of course.
So there you go.
Karma.
And yeah, very good karma. And you brought up Jason Patrick, and I want to make that connection real quick. Like I said, some of these guys did some stupid stuff, and I had, I'm going to be biased, and I'm going to be honest about it. I have a bias when it comes to Jason Patrick. He's my friend, and I know him personally. I know he's a great guy. I know he's the salt of the earth. Did I agree with everything that was going on out there? Hell no. He knows that, but what makes me very ecstatic about this acquittal is, one, the likelihood of the charges against Jason being dropped have just increased exponentially, which is great. You know what I mean? Second, I'm not going to speak for Patrick here. I'm just going to tell you, as somebody who has observed his interaction with the public, the experience in jail and the experience after being released from jail brought him into to a closer relationship with his understanding of God, to where he has become a very deeply spiritual man, more than I've ever seen him in person. And anybody who's followed his stuff on Facebook, on the Fight for Freedom Never Sleeps, his personal Facebook page, and downloaded content /JPP or the Jason Patrick Project, knows that the entire time this trial's been going on, Patrick's been there every day. It's not his trial. He's not there. He's not there to hear for himself or speak for himself yet. But he's been there every day. He's been posting updates every day, and it's very heavily based in his faith, which is Christianity. And the entire time that this trial's been going on, he's continued to say that by the grace of God, a statement was going to be made here. Okay, every single day. There was one point where he posted a picture of a rainbow going from the jailhouse to the courthouse, and it was a beautiful image, and so he's getting in touch with that side of himself, and he has said this entire time that this acquittal is due in part to the faith of those involved through prayer. Now you can take that and you can apply that to whatever your understanding of spirituality is, but it's very powerful when you do.
No, absolutely, and that's something that needs to be said here. Again, I think that for the most part, although the point is being made in the chat room, there were 15 rats apparently who gave over evidence, et cetera, et cetera. I think that that's a valid point. Okay, I'm not sure if 15 is correct, but I'll take your word for it there, chat person. The fact is that these guys had a principle, they had an idea, and it was based, partially in their faith, that's for sure, not just in a spiritual sense, but also in the ability to restore the Constitution. Let's not forget that. And look, I applaud them for the fact that they were not wrongfully punished here. It is still a heartbreaking thing to me that LaVoy Finicum had to lose his life. It is still one of those things that even though it has turned out that these guys were not punished for this particular action, there's still more to come, obviously, out of the Nevada courts. So on and so forth. And again, if you want to join in this conversation, 218-339-8525, 218-339-8525 is the number to call in, and I will add you into the discussion if you have anything to say about this. But the reality is, my major complaint, once again, was with the public perception, was with the idea that, and of course people reminded me here again, the vanilla ISIS thing, the whole domestic terrorism thing and everything else. We know that in the age we live in, if that was something that could have been viably sold to these 12 people, they would have put these guys under the prison. Okay.
Well, hey, the chatter that's in the chat room says, will this verdict wake up the normals to see their government is abusive? Well, I did want to touch on a couple things there. One, you remember when this all went down, the mainstream media did have a ball with it and called them vanilla ISIS, and they're a bunch of rednecks, and Stephen Colbert had a good time with it. I actually thought that was fucking hilarious. Excuse me for saying fucking. I didn't
Here we go again.
Yeah. Fuck up your fucking radio show. Anyway.
Yeah.
But anyway, so the mainstream media had a ball with it, right? And they made some pretty good stuff that was funny. So the verdict comes out that these guys are not guilty. Where's the mainstream media?
Well, in fairness, we have seen reports on Fox, MSNBC, CNN, et cetera. They've all reported on their websites and done television presentations to announce the not guilty verdict. That's for sure. Yeah. They have done.
All right, so let's go ahead and count how many days they do that. Or if it's going to be a let's brush it under the rug type thing. Oh, yeah, they were not guilty in other news.
And back to Kim Kardashian and how big is her ass and what happened to the diamonds. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, let's see if they do that. So other than that, the idea that the attorney was tased. One, I'm not a lawyer, but to me, from what I'm understanding from the news reports, this attorney was, one, legally correct and had every right to do what he did for his client. And the fact that he's tased at this event really doesn't help the federal government's case against these guys in Nevada at all, because, this is obviously going to be brought up. And so you're going to take this stuff back to Nevada. You're going to carry these guys back to Nevada. I mean, look, they spent almost a year in jail. They just got found out guilty. Can they get a Whopper? Can they get a cheese double Whopper or something? Can they get laid before you guys extradite them to Nevada to sit for another year? Let them out for a minute. I mean, it's not like they're not going back to Nevada. That's where they live, So I didn't see the point in them not letting these guys walk and just extradite them straight to Nevada. I didn't get that. So I thought their attorney, whatever the legalities is, I thought he was doing what he's supposed to be doing. He's taking up for his client. So he gets tased and arrested?
Well, even if he wasn't legally absolutely correct, the fact is that he is supposed to be performing as an advocate before the bar for his client. So even if he wasn't entirely well within his rights legally, the fact is that he should have been mounting exactly these types of objections and arguments right then and there, because that's his job. But, once again, do you think anybody's going to get charged for the fact that this guy got tased and this becomes a whole other public spectacle? I don't think so. And again, I didn't really see that as part of the reports going on most of the MSM. And, quite honestly, haven't heard a whole lot. I mean, RBN and a couple other places have reported on it, but outside of that, you won't hear it too many places. Go ahead.
Yeah, but to summate it, I think that I'm very happy about it because this right here it corrects the mistake of how that standoff ended with David Fry and a couple of the other cats out there in front of the cameras just being complete goofballs. If we make sure that this acquittal is the bookend on that entire story, great. It kind of makes up for David Fry and these other cats out there with bulldozers signing talent release forms and shit like that. Made them look real bad, made the whole thing look real bad. So if we just focus on the acquittal, that's great. Now, where we go from here is, all right, guys, anybody who supports what happened in Malheur or anybody who was involved, all right, look, big victory, great. We're all happy for you. We're all cheering for you to do something the next time. But before you do, you really need to look over this past incident and see what worked, what didn't work, what was hurtful to the movement, what was helpful, who was hurtful, and who was helpful. Okay? That really needs to be examined. Really. It really does need to be examined going forth because this acquittal is either going to flicker out like a bottle rocket, or it could do something else if it's handled correctly.
No, absolutely right. And, we haven't given Barry a chance to really chime in on this very much. But, Barry, as a Canadian, you're looking at this from the outside. Yeah, I know. Don't tell anybody.
Is that why he sounds all messed up? I thought he had a speech impediment.
Well, I was going to say the same thing about you, man. You talk really weird.
You talk funny. You talk funny, Bear.
Talk funny. You should listen to yourself, man.
With all due respect,
down there, you guys really sound weird to me, but that's okay.
Listen, with all due respect, both of you got accents over there, all right? You know, come on.
It's all about the genetics.
There you go.
You know, I've been listening to your conversation between you two, Chuck, and on this whole subject here, I'm not anywhere near informed like you guys are, but to me, the whole thing stinks of overreach of government. Everything the government does is overreach, and I'm glad to see these people stand up against it, but I can't really, get myself involved in this conversation too much, buddy, because, I haven't followed it anywhere near as much as you and Daniel have. But I'm listening with great interest. So I'll just kind of sit in the background. If we change the subject to something else like cannabis, I'll jump in.
Hey, I understand, but I'm just saying from an outsider's point of view, though, if you remember the emerging story at the time, you would not have thought, really, honestly, you wouldn't have said it's easily predictable here that the leadership of the individuals who took this action would wind up with not guilty verdicts when they went to court. I mean, you got to say that that's a little bit of a surprise and a big victory, I think, for people who have the right intentions, at least seemingly.
Yeah, well, you're right, Chuck, because like Daniel said, if it's used correctly, it could be a tremendous tool. So let's hope it doesn't flicker, because what this judge has done and this jury has done is laid down a guideline that other juries can have a look at and say, hey, why did they go the route they did and what were the reasons? And perhaps they'll look into the reasons and understand that it is based on the Constitution. I have a copy of your Constitution on my wall here, Chuck, believe it or not, and I've read it. And I think more Americans should pay attention to it, because it sounds to me, right from the beginning, this whole movement was about defending the Constitution. And like you said, Daniel, they went about some things the wrong way, but I think that was a major victory for freedom-thinking people, Chuck.
Yeah, absolutely. And Daniel, that's what should be taken away. But I say again, like you're saying, they should re-examine this and understand what worked, what did not work. Obviously, cost benefit analysis, if you will, of the action needs to be had here. But I also caution the fact that, given the idea that there are individuals who did turn state's evidence here, who knows what damage has actually been done to individuals that have been networked, so on and so forth. And I don't think we've heard the last of the attempts to prosecute many of the people involved, not only in the in that incident up there in Oregon, but also, hey, we're still looming with this 2014 thing at the Bundy Ranch, and what do you got to say about that?
Oh, well, the federal government's going to have a very tough time in Nevada. And the reason they're going to have a tough time is because these guys just got acquitted for an event that they did in Oregon, okay? They took over a wildlife refuge, all right? This stuff in Nevada was basically on their property and their grazing property. So it wasn't like they went and they were just defending their home. Now, you're going to get one, you already got an acquittal here in Oregon. Two, you're going to pull a bunch of peers from an area of ranchers and stuff like that, like Clive and Bundy, who already are going to sympathize and empathize with the Bundys. And so the government's going to drop their charges on most of them. If Harry Reid really wants to press it, they may go for the Bundys. But for the most part, no. The government's not going to spend that much money on it because they can already see it's a moot point. Here. So, that's my thing. And that's great. I don't want Patrick, when Patrick goes to court February, which I don't even think is going to happen now, they're going to drop the charges. And if they don't, who cares? Because, one, let's remember that one of the Ammons represented themselves in this case in Oregon. So not only is it a big victory for the Constitution, it's a big victory for pro se, or representing yourself without an attorney. It's a big win there, and I hope that people emphasize that. This guy defended himself in court, okay? Now, that's great, and I'll tell you, I don't know the Bundys personally, never met them, but they're not good talkers. They're not good communicators. You know what I mean? You almost have to be kind of a country bumpkin to get, the tempo they're preaching from. Now, there's one thing that Jason Patrick excels in and reigns supreme on, and that is communicating. Jason Patrick is an excellent communicator because he's telling you what he really believes in and what he really feels in his heart, and that's what makes him a great communicator. And Jason Patrick has said from the very beginning that any legal dissertations that he gets involved in, he's going to represent himself. Now, look, you're going to put Jason Patrick, a master communicator, in front of a jury of Americans, and you think the federal government's going to win that one? I don't think so. I think Jason Patrick being in front of a jury and representing himself and speaking from the heart is going to not be just a spark in the Liberty Patriot movement. It's going to be a fucking chokehold. Okay?
Well, and you know what the reality is? If the feds are smart here, the real leadership here, they already lost them, and Jason was not even remotely, from what I understood, from what I observed myself, didn't seem to be as deeply entrenched in this action as others who have already been acquitted. So it would probably be wise for them to just dismiss the case without prejudice, just get rid of it. And that would give Jason less of an opportunity to make his case publicly. As far as the court system is concerned, it might actually deflate some of what could come of it if he was allowed to make that presentation. What do you think?
I'll put it to you this way. If they do not drop the charges and Patrick is allowed to represent himself in front of a jury of his peers using only the Constitution, if that happens, what every person listening to this needs to know is that you have absolutely no fear of your government. And when I say your government, I mean the NSA, the FBI, the CIA. You don't have to fear a thing, because if they can't figure this out and drop the charges, they are as inept to surveil you as a snail is to have salt on its pasta. Okay? Now, if they drop the charges because they're very good at their job and they've done psychoanalysis of Patrick and listened to everything he's ever written or said on YouTube and did a psych eval, and they say, you know what, charges are dropped, and Patrick doesn't get in front of a jury, then you might have an enemy that you might need to be wary of. Okay?
No, that's exactly the case here, and I think it would be just absolute stupidity to bring him in front of a jury and let him make a public statement that'll wind up being on the record that way, because it'll just be so counterproductive to what it is they're trying to accomplish. It's not even funny. So, I'm wondering what happened to Jesse, because I was hoping that Jesse Horn would have called in by now, but do we have any word on that? Do you know anything about it yet?
Last thing I knew is he was going down to the pipeline protest that's kind of big in the news right now. You have, for the first time in American history, all of the tribes, I guess you would call them, of Native Americans are uniting to fight this pipeline. And you have a lot of big-name celebrities, not that really matters, but it does, that are going down there to the pipeline, and Jesse Horn is also one of them. He was one of the first people to volunteer to get arrested in this whole thing, and from what I'm kind of gleaning on the scuttlebutt, he has committed a lot of, his time, treasure, blood, and money to dedicate himself to fighting this pipeline. And for a young kid to do that, it speaks volumes, for one, and it means we better pay attention. The last that I do know is he was going to come on tonight, but he had just gotten out of jail because of this, and so we're kind of the contact there is off and on.
Okay, so it may be that he's still involved in the action there and can't get to us, but fact is, you've heard Jesse on this show before. If you listened a few weeks ago, we actually had an update from him and discussed nonviolent resistance, discussed the way that the protest was being handled, exactly what he felt like he was accomplishing, that's for sure, and definitely applaud him, especially for being such a young man and having having the wherewithal to think these things through as he has and to do what he's done. So, if Jesse doesn't wind up joining us, we definitely certainly wish him well and hope that he is safe. If nothing else right now, who knows, he could be back in custody because I'm sure that, him getting locked up again for something that's going to turn into a ticket probably did not dissuade him from going back at it. So he may have been taken back into custody for all we know at this point, right?
For all we know, I mean, God bless him. He's out there doing something like from my understanding, he left his job, he left his home, the state that he was in to go out there and stop this pipeline. And so you're talking about a 21, 22-year-old kid that's doing this? Come on, man. Something's happening out there.
No, absolutely. And again, I say that we need to understand that when you see something, you not only need to say something, but you need to do something. And some of these guys are getting it a lot sooner than I certainly did, that we needed to react to the problem here and to deal with it up front. And Jesse's definitely doing that. So whether he makes it or not, I do want to make sure that we, let him know that he's appreciated in case he hears this later, and sure that he didn't make it because he's very busy at the moment.
You were saying, Daniel, that all the First Nation chiefs have got together to oppose this pipeline?
There's a lot out west. There's a lot of Native American tribes who never before have come together under any banner. And you have a lot of them coming together now underneath this banner because this pipeline is supposed to run through their holy land, basically.
Right. Through sacred land. Through yeah, exactly. I was reading some of the information on it, but I wasn't aware of the rise against the government. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and I think this is important because, look, there is a lot of money, time, and resources that are exported from this country to a strip of land that's no bigger than Bibb County, which is here in Georgia, called Israel. And because of certain people's belief structures, that money really flows over there. And so if that's a big deal, then maybe we should also pay attention to holy land of indigenous people too. If we're going to, we might as well make sense as a country. If we're going to send all this money to Israel, which is a precious land and country to one religious group, this pipeline that's tearing through another religious group's holy land, let's be consistent in our morality.
I agree. Give them the same amount of respect.
Right.
We have the same kind of thing going on up here right now with the LNG, Daniel. The companies have spent hundreds of millions of dollars in preparation for the liquefied natural gas line that's supposed to go from Alberta right into Kitimat. But the opposition is put a stop to it. We put a stop to it temporarily. There's tens of thousands of British Columbians standing against it. And it's not a done deal, but yet you see these corporations have already spent literally hundreds of millions of dollars in preparing for it. So it's like they know eventually they'll lobby the government and they'll get what they want, but you got to go through the legal crap with the citizens and make them feel like they're actually being heard. But this time I think there's enough people speaking against it that they're actually going to have to listen to us.
Yeah, well, I'm at the point right now, Barry, where it's like, look, civilization after Tesla that depends on fossil fuels is doing something to deliberately sabotage civilization.
Of course it is.
You know what I mean?
Fossil fuels do not belong in our world, Daniel.
No,
they're not
at
necessary.
all.
Not at all. We know that. Everybody sitting here knows that, but it's getting the public educated to the point to understand that if we continue down the road of fossil fuels, that we are going to die, that your children are going to suffer. And that is one of the things that I try to stress to people is that, believe it or not, that everything we need to power everything we need on our planet is right over top of our heads.
That's
and all
right.
we got to do is grab it.
That's right.
But people still aren't waking up to it, Daniel. So that's one of the things I love talking to people about because, man, we don't have a lot of time to talk about nuclear. We don't want to even get into that. But if we look at what we're doing to generate power on the planet right now, everything we're doing is destroying the planet. The very biosphere of our planet is collapsing. We are facing the biggest mass extinction event that we've ever witnessed in our human history. We've seen 4 mass extinction events in what they call recorded time, where they, 10 million years ago you had an asteroid strike the Earth, or you went through 2 or 3 super volcanic eruptions on the planet and we had a mass extinction event, but life always managed to survive. But I think this extinction event is different, where we've introduced nuclear power to the planet, and nuclear power, nuclear isotopes have the capability of destroying all life on the planet, and when it's dead, it's dead. I don't know if the planet will ever come back, or if it does, it's going to be 10 or 15 or 20 million years before life comes back to this planet. If we go down the path we're going, guys, all the scientists are now saying that we have, if we don't change it now, we have max to 2030 before we are all dead. Well, that's not a lot of years away, guys, and, my children are pretty young. So we really got to do as much as we can to educate people to what's coming.
Wow.
The responsibility, that's a fact.
You just put a stake out for some sharks, dude. That's a discussion we really need to have in depth. But
we do.
I don't think this show. However, if Chuck will allow me, I'm going to become a commercial producer for just a minute.
Okay.
Is that cool?
No, absolutely. I hope that you're going to address the fact that over our heads, like Barry said, you have the power of the sun, which could be harnessed, and also the wind. These are 2 resources which are not being properly managed, that are not detrimental at all to the biosphere. And wouldn't that be a wonderful thing? But go ahead, Daniel.
Yeah, like I said, that's for another show. However, I did want to let people know, anybody who is a part of the Ochelli Effect radio show on Facebook got a message from me today. We do have a GoFundMe for Ochelli Effect. It's GoFundMe.com/Ochelli Effect. And because of the people who have donated, Patricia and Chuck, I'll let you pronounce her last name.
That's Braunschweiler, yeah.
All right. A special thanks to her and to you, Barry. Because of your donation to the GoFundMe campaign, a mini documentary featuring Chuck Ochelli is under production because of you guys' contribution. And we really want to thank you guys, because we couldn't have done it without you. So that is also going to be put out there very, very soon. And if you are a member of the radio show chat room, what we are looking for is audio, video, or either or. If you are a listener of Chuck Ochelli, or if you've been a previous guest, I'd like to use some of that footage of the mini documentary. Okay, so I want to go ahead and push that real quick, because we're trying to Chuck is really trying to expand, and I really support what he's doing. I know, Barry, you do too, and all the listeners who are passionate out there. Every penny counts with the GoFundMe campaign. If you guys have like a coffee habit or a soda habit, if you can go one day this month without one Mountain Dew or one coffee and make a donation at GoFundMe.com/Ochelli Effect to help him expand so we can get him on, video, audio, and stuff like that, it would be greatly appreciated. Don't wait for somebody else to do it. Please do it right now. Because right now, with all this stuff that's happening in the physical, metaphysical, political, and all that, you really want to be listening to Chuck. You want him to excel in what he's doing, his platform, to get this information to you. We're moving beyond Alex Jones land. We're moving beyond, all the fear and all the hate and all that. And Chuck is one of the forerunners, and that's why I support him and love him and come on his show all the time. So, really, honestly, go there right now, make a donation, and help him get out there more and more. Like I said, anybody who is interested, be on the lookout for the new documentary coming out with Chuck Ochelli called Nutshell. And Chuck, you want to tell them why we called it that?
No, I think we'll save that for another time. It's a great name, though, and I think it can be taken many different ways. It's kind of poetic. Of course, it's kind of an homage to the Alice in Chains song, which, one of my favorite bands. Obviously, it's kind of interesting. Even people that know me have difficulty naming what would be my top 4 favorite bands in history. Very few people know what I consider to be the best stuff, but Alice in Chains is one of them. In fact, number 3 on my list. One of the greatest bands of all time, and I love that song. But there's more to it than that, folks, and it's going to be an interesting presentation.
Yeah.
Of course.
Now, let me go ahead and brag. Me and Chuck were, we've kind of set up a makeshift studio to get this documentary done, and we were watching kind of the raw footage. This footage was shot, I think we got about, I don't know how many hours of footage we got, Chuck. We got a lot. And it was basically, Chuck off the mic, not being, he was just being Chuck. And we got a lot of really good stuff, a lot of really good footage, a lot of really good information. When it comes together, it's going to be great. It's going to be not just an intimate thing with Chuck, who the man really is, but his perspective, which is strange because, he is legally blind. He sees things different than we do. And so this documentary does that too, because you're looking through the eyes of a blind man, so to speak. So, I'm real hyped up about it, and I told him today, I said, you know what, he's been in the cutting room with me, and I told him today, I said, you know what, enough. You don't get to see any more. You've seen enough of the raw footage. Leave me alone. Let me do my Spielberg shit. Sorry, I said shit in your radio shit. And I had to let iTunes know I said shit. So,
yeah.
Wait a second, hold on. You guys are telling me that Chuck is legally blind?
Yeah. And
you want to pick mushrooms, Chuck?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, sure.
So I got to carry your ass in the bush, and then I got to find him for you.
Well, you don't got to carry me, but you might have to find some things, maybe, possibly. Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Look,
I better get in shape.
I find a way to adapt, brothers. I do. Go ahead.
So let me condense it. Basically, what I'm saying is, I kicked him out of the cutting room. I said, enough. You don't need to see the rest of it. Let somebody else do your stuff for you. And so it's going to be great, man. It's going to be a great documentary. You guys are going to hear some stuff you've never heard before from Chuck, without a mic, out in his own kind of element. And that would not have been possible if it hadn't been for you, Barry, and you, Patricia, and we thank you guys. And, anybody who's listening right now, really, honestly, go to GoFundMe /Ochelli Effect, $1. Don't wait for anybody else to do it. $1. All right, and we'll see where we can take this, because as we move forward, all of us together, we have to support those who are kind of holding up a lantern, holding up a light, and Chuck's one of them. So that's my commercial. I don't want to sound like a begathon, but honestly, we don't get paid for this. Chuck doesn't get paid for it, but it's a full-time job, if not more.
And I do appreciate that. Of course, we're just about out of time. And Daniel Louis Crumpton is the author of Then Came the Flood, also the proprietor, the mastermind behind downloadedcontent.com. Definitely advise you go there, check that out. Barry Prince has been with us this whole time. We didn't get the callers I wanted, but hey, things happen. Barry Prince has been with us the whole time. He is the host of The Big Puzzle, and that will be coming back as Shake and Wake Radio reemerges once again, because thankfully Rick and Annie are in a better spot and they're going to be able to get back to work. And so is Barry very shortly. I want to thank you guys for joining us, and thank all of you who have decided to listen tonight and take the time to hear the information that we've decided to impart, and hopefully we provoked some thought in your minds. So once again, Barry, thanks so much.
You're welcome. Hey, Chuck, people, get behind Chuck, because I've known Chuck for 3 years now, and I know the man speaks from the heart, and we need more and more people out there like Chuck, and let's get behind him. And $1 is nothing, guys, or $2 is nothing. Everybody can do that. So let's get behind this guy, because we need the voice out there. Thanks for having me in, Chuck. It's a pleasure to call you my friend. Always a pleasure to join you.
And these two gentlemen that have been on with me tonight are my brothers, and I mean that. I don't just throw that term around. Daniel Louis Crumpton, of course. Maybe I'm a little closer to you at the moment than some other people, but
I know one thing. I know that everybody who doesn't have a speech impediment, they're going to go out and support Chalk.
Very good.
Downloaded Content Podcast. Downloaded.